Abroad now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, or perhaps good morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us for today's webinar and a great discussion on how you're going to grow or can grow your network with 802.11ac. My name is Pablo Estrada. I'm with the Cisco Meraki team. We have some fantastic content lined up for the next hour or so, and really a very exciting topic, especially and very exciting time for wireless with a new standard coming out. We'll start off with a brief introduction to Meraki and to cloud management, and then we'll dive into an overview of 802.11ac. We'll go into a little bit of the technical details, looking into how 11ac gets some pretty significant speed improvements. Then we'll go into how specifically some 802.11ac APs like the MR34 can benefit your environment. And we'll mix that in with a product demo actually showing you live an 802.11ac deployment. And then we'll go into some key considerations for when you're looking into deploying 802.11ac, whether it's in a completely new deployment, sometimes called greenfield, or whether you are upgrading or phasing in your existing 11n or perhaps even older deployment. Then we'll wrap it up with a quick look at the Meraki product families and then leave some time at the end for Q&A. Now, if you do have any questions throughout the presentation or the demo, please go ahead and enter them into the questions area. It would be fantastic if we have some questions and some interactivity as we go. My colleague Olivia is here with me on the line and waiting for your questions, so go ahead and keep her busy. And also, when we do get to the end, the Q&A, if we do have some time, we can actually go into some of the discussion and repeat some of the questions, go into them for a little bit further discussion. Now, before we get started with what's on here today, let's just cover one item of logistics, and that's something that's pretty exciting, that we are giving away a free wireless AP to the qualified IT professionals that are here with us today. This is a Cisco Meraki 802.11n access point, similar to the ones that you see there on the screen, and it comes with a 3-year cloud management license. It's yours to keep. You can get it up and running in about 5 minutes or so, and then you'll have the full experience of the Meraki dashboard and the Meraki hardware right in your own hands. Now, we do ask that you please give us a quick call so that we can confirm the shipping information that we have on file for you. And naturally, you'll want to talk to your Cisco Meraki rep, and if you can't find that person's contact information, just go ahead and search your email for a reminder email that was sent before the start of today's webinar. Okay, so let's dive in then to the first topic in our agenda, and that's to give a little introduction and background about Cisco Meraki. Cisco Meraki is a 100% cloud-managed networking solution. That means Wi-Fi, switching, security appliances, WAN optimization, and even MDM, all of which are centrally managed from the cloud. And in fact, they're designed and built by the Cisco Meraki team from the ground up for cloud management. And what that really means is that they have a tightly integrated set of hardware with software, with cloud services that together deliver a very feature-rich yet easy-to-use solution right out of the box. The Meraki solution is really the leader in cloud-managed networking. There are tens of thousands of customers that have deployed the solution across all kinds of industries. And recently, we've been seeing tremendous growth. In fact, over 100% annual growth. And we've been operating in the cloud since 2006. And over those years, we've been recognized not only by those tens of thousands of customers, but also by outside organizations for our innovation. For example, CRN, InfoWorld, and Gartner with their Magic Quadrant for wired and wireless LAN infrastructure. Now, we're going to, of course, focus today on 11ac and Wi-Fi, but a lot of the aspects that we'll talk about really apply to cloud-managed networking and really show how we're bringing the benefits of the cloud to enterprise networking. So we'll go through a product demo, as I mentioned earlier, and while we'll dive into Wi-Fi, actually many of the tools that we'll use and the ability to remotely monitor and manage and the way that we manage the network equally apply for the switches or security appliances, and even for the MDM. all of those parts of the solution are managed through the single pane of glass, the Meraki dashboard, which we'll show you in just a moment. Before we dive into the demo and into the technology background of 11AC, it'll be pretty useful to go into a little bit of the cloud networking architecture just to give you some background of how it works. And then when we get into the demo, you'll have a better understanding of what we're showing and how it's actually working behind the scenes. At a high level, it really starts off with devices that you deploy on site, naturally like APs or switches or security appliances. And these Meraki devices are connected to the Meraki cloud. They do that through a secure link over which management and configuration data is exchanged. And that's true if you have a deployment at a single campus location, or if you have many branch offices, or even hundreds or thousands of retail stores, also for teleworker, home office type workers. Regardless, all of these parts of the network are connected to the Meraki cloud, and it's that system and that connectivity that gives the IT department centralized visibility and control via the Meraki dashboard. Now, we've taken a few key elements of cloud in general and cloud in general with regards to how it affects IT, and we're bringing those benefits to enterprise networks. So let's just consider a few of them, and there are a couple of important points to note about the architecture that we just introduced in the previous slide that really affect some of these aspects around security, reliability, and scalability. The first one to note is that no user traffic passes through the cloud. It's just management and configuration data that goes between the Meraki AP or the Meraki switch and the cloud. And if a user is performing a simple web search, or if they're accessing a file that's off in some internal corporate data center, that traffic and that data simply flows between the end user's device, naturally through the internal infrastructure like the Wi-Fi AP, and then it goes to its final destination. It's not routed through the cloud or routed through a central location, as is the case with some traditional enterprise wireless solutions. And the same is true for, of course, the switches and security appliances. Now, this is just one aspect of the built-in and robust security of the solution as a whole. We've also integrated some pretty advanced features for that security. For example, two-factor authentication, security audits, vulnerability testing, firmware and security updates, and a whole host more that together enable the solution to be deployed in secure environments like healthcare or retail. And in fact, we are compliant with PCI Level 1, which is the most stringent level of PCI DSS certification, which retailers and financial institutions follow. Now, another aspect of the cloud that we're bringing to networking is the ease of scalability. And I'm sure you've seen this with other solutions. For example, Gmail comes to mind immediately, Dropbox. In those systems, you don't really have to worry about provisioning accounts and provisioning users or provisioning storage on the back end. You simply sign up for more storage in the case of something like Dropbox, or in the case of something like Gmail or Google Apps, you just create a new user. You don't have to worry about upgrading the servers and provisioning that and so on. And it works in a very similar way with the Meraki system. If you want to add capacity and grow your network, you simply purchase an access point or a switch. You deploy it in your environment. You might be mounting it or putting it up in the roof. And when you turn it on, you just connect it to your internal infrastructure, like the local switch, and it automatically connects to the Meraki cloud. It identifies itself by its serial number, and of course the cloud knows that it belongs to you, and it downloads, the AP downloads its configuration, applies it, and it is simply there as part of your network and visible and available for monitoring and management in the dashboard. So you don't have to provision any management server. You don't have to provision the device itself beforehand. In fact, if you are managing a remote location, whether it's adding capacity out there or even bringing it up entirely, you can have someone that's not a networking expert turn it on and plug it in and mount it. And then you can monitor that activity and manage it accordingly from the dashboard from your central office. And last but certainly not least is reliability. With today's environments and today's business requirements, it's definitely of utmost importance that the network be as reliable as possible. Now, we've also designed the architecture with this in mind, and specifically, the network will still continue to work even if the connection to the cloud is temporarily interrupted. So if that link in blue is for some reason temporarily unavailable or interrupted, the local network will still work. Users will still be able to print. They'll still be able to save to file servers, whether that's locally or perhaps across a VPN. They'll still be able to roam and so on. It's the ability to make a configuration change or use some of the real-time visibility and troubleshooting tools that wouldn't be available in that case. We've also designed the entire system with reliability in mind. For example, in the previous slide, we didn't go into details about data centers and where they're located and how many there are, but we do have multiple data centers distributed around the world, and they have built-in data replication, backup, and so on. And so we back up the reliability of the system with a very high uptime SLA, 4 nines of uptime SLA. If you have any more questions about the cloud aspects or those data centers, we do have some more information available online at the link below, meraki.cisco.com. Of course, feel free to ask in the questions area. And also, if you have more follow-up questions, you can definitely ask your Cisco Meraki rep about that. So let's dive in then into one of the most exciting topics in networking today, and that's 802.11ac. It's not every day or every year that a new Wi-Fi standard comes, and this one is pretty exciting because it has some significant benefits. And we're seeing some significant challenges and trends in IT environments, and specifically that applications are getting hungrier and hungrier for more and more bandwidth and are affected, and the network and wireless especially are being affected by the hundreds of millions of mobile devices, new business applications, video and rich media, video conferencing, and what seems to be an insatiable appetite for bandwidth, whether that's on the wired network or especially with all these devices on the Wi-Fi. Now, 802.11ac is really designed to address those challenges. It's built for next generation networks and designed to support higher throughput, more devices. If we look at how it compares to 11n, the current or previous specification, it is 802.11n is a few years old now. It's thankfully supported by nearly all devices, and it tops out in terms of maximum speeds at 450 megabits per second. 802.11ac, in contrast, it is newer, so of course it's not as widely supported as 11n yet, but we already have found that many new computers and high-end smartphones and mobile devices are supporting it. Thankfully, it is fully backwards compatible with the previous generation of standards, not only 11n, but also even going further back to 11a, b, and g. However, it does actually future-proof the network because it provides up to 1.3 gigabits per second of top data rate, which is 3 times faster than 802.11n. You can see the comparison. If we think not too long ago when 11G was coming out, we were looking at 54 megabits per second, which at that time was quite speedy. And then 11N actually evolved to get up to 450 megabits per second. And now with 11ac, we're coming right out of the gate with over a gigabit per second. So where does the speed come from for 11ac? This actually has some significant implications for the deployment and the environment that you might be considering or managing. So let's take a look at where 802.11ac gets its speed increase. And the most important thing to understand, perhaps, is that it operates on the 5 gigahertz band only. The 5 gigahertz band has more spectrum and less interference when compared to the 2.4 gigahertz band. And if we just take a look at the very standard configuration in 20 megahertz channels, we'll see that in terms of spectrum, the 2.4 gigahertz band has 3 non-overlapping 20 megahertz channels. The 5 gigahertz band has 23 non-overlapping 20 megahertz channels. Now, some of these things will vary based on your region and country of deployment because the regulations differ a little bit and not all channels are available in all countries. But if we just look at the general band planning, there is a lot more available spectrum in 5 gigahertz. And thankfully, there's also less interference. 2.4 gigahertz is not only supported by nearly every Wi-Fi device, it's also prone to interference from things like Bluetooth, microwave ovens, cordless phones, you name it. Some type of device has been made to work on the 2.4 gigahertz band. And of course, that makes it very crowded. There's not much room there to begin with. There's interference. And so devices that only work with the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, like some smartphones, for example, or lower end Wi Fi devices, they're a little bit at a disadvantage because they cannot take advantage of the extra space and lower interference in 5 gigahertz. So now that we have this extra space, 802.11ac actually takes quite a bit of advantage of that by increasing the channel bandwidth up to 80 megahertz. Now, we started off by looking at channelization with 20 megahertz channels, 23 available in the 5 gigahertz band. If we increase that from 20 to 40, and now with from 40 to 80, we'll see that there are quite a bit fewer 80 megahertz channels that are non-overlapping in that 5 gigahertz band. But there still are a fair number. You'll see there are 6 that are shown here, and that still allows for a fairly dense environment for 11AC at 80 megahertz. And widening the channel bandwidth to 80 megahertz really doubles the size of the pipe that's used to transmit data, and thus enables faster transmissions and higher throughput for environments that are taking advantage of that extra bandwidth. Another way 802.11ac increases its speed is through something called an enhanced modulation type, in this case 256 QAM. And we'll see here a comparison between 802.11n, which uses 64 QAM, and 11ac, which uses the newer 256 QAM. This basically allows for a more efficient transmission of data, packing more bits into the same amount of time and through the same space as we would have done with 11n when it's using 64 QAM. And so this gives 11ac a little bit extra speed boost, and together with the increased channel bandwidth that we just talked about, allow it to get to 1.3 gigabits per second in top data rate. Now, something that's very important when we start to talk about bands and speeds and connectivity is how we can handle legacy clients. Thankfully, legacy clients can still connect to 802.11ac access points, and this is just an example of how that would happen. If we have, say, an 11ac client, 11ac only works on 5 gigahertz, so that client would likely connect on the 5 gigahertz band using 11ac. We may also have a slightly older 11a or n client that can connect on 5 gigahertz. It can do that as well. And another access point will perhaps only have 2.4 gigahertz capability, another client. And this one, if it's B, G, or N, will connect on the 2.4 gigahertz band, might be using any of those standards and not have quite as speedy of transmission or throughput as the other two, but all of these together can simultaneously connect to that 11ac access point, and thus it can support a mix of new clients and legacy clients. And so this is pretty important because it allows us to deploy 11ac in a phased approach. We don't necessarily have to take out all the existing 11n infrastructure and replace it with 11ac. So let's have a look at a specific 11ac access point, the Meraki MR34, and we'll actually give you a quick introduction here and then go into a live demo of the MR34 in the Meraki dashboard. Now, the MR34 is designed for 11ac, but it really is more than just faster Wi-Fi. It does have a customized RF front end for the 5 gigahertz triple stream 11ac functionality that's shown here on the lower left. And it also has a radio for 2.4 gigahertz operation for 11B, G, and N. And it has even a third radio that's dedicated to RF optimization and security that operates full-time, not to serve clients, but to protect the environment and make sure it's optimized for performance. There are some additional features like an enhanced CPU for providing layer 7 security and layer 7 quality of service, even at those high 11ac speeds, and some optimized power circuitry to support 802.3 AF. That also has some implications for the infrastructure if you're relying on PoE. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means for an upgrade or a deployment later on in the presentation. The third radio is something that's new to the Meraki solution and is dedicated to security and RF optimization. In fact, it's looking at both bands and running 3 processes on each channel every second across those bands. First of all, it looks at raw RF data using spectral scans. And then in terms of providing security, it looks for rogue SSIDs, it'll detect them, and if you want to, you can optionally have them contained automatically and thus mitigate threats automatically, or you can go into the dashboard and manually contain rogue SSIDs or rogue APs when you evaluate an event and decide that it is a threat that should be mitigated. The way this works is through something called Air Marshal, which is a technology that includes the hardware and the software and algorithms that are built into the AP. It's designed to protect the network with this scanning radio, and it identifies vulnerabilities and attacks, for example, unmanaged and insecure access points that might be plugged into the LAN, rogues that are spoofing your legitimate wireless network, and even attacks like packet floods and malicious broadcasts. And it actually contains the rogue APs and blocks clients from associating to the rogue by sending a pair of what are called deauthorization and containment packets. It actually tricks both the client and the AP into thinking that the other side is terminating the connection. So it'll send a packet to the AP to make the AP think that the client is actually requesting deauthorization and it's leaving and disconnecting from the network. And it'll also send a packet to the client to fool the client into thinking that the rogue access point is in fact forcing deauthorization and forcing the client to disconnect. And so in this way, it'll render the rogue AP ineffective, and the client will have to connect to another access point, such as one that's part of the legitimate network. In terms of the RF optimization, this is also powered by the dedicated radio. The access points are continuously gathering signal strength, channel utilization, interference levels, neighboring Meraki access point power levels and signal strength, and so on. And they're using those bits of data to compute the optimal RF settings for your environment. And if there is an interference event that they detect, then they may decide to change the channel. If it's a prolonged interference effect and actually the AP detects that the channel is jammed, then they'll change the channel. And this happens when the utilization and or interference is sustained at above 90% capacity. In those cases, the clients that are either trying or already connected to the AP will be having a pretty poor experience. And so it's it's the decision of the AP to change the channel to choose one that has less interference and isn't jammed. And the clients, of course, will connect to the AP on the new channel and then have a speedier and more reliable experience. Now, these two things work right out of the box and are built into the MR34. There's no configuration required for to enable that or to take advantage of it. And when turned on, the APs will simply start to scan and they'll optimize the RF and so on. If you do want to dig into the details about it, there are some real-time troubleshooting tools that are built into the dashboard. We'll show you this live in just a bit. And this way you can look at that raw spectral data across 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands. You'll see not only utilization metrics, but also the spectrum view instantaneously and over time with a built-in high-resolution spectrum analyzer. So let's go into the Meraki dashboard and in fact have a look at a real live 802.11ac network. So I'm logging into the dashboard and I'll pull up what's called the Meraki organization. This is simply the name of an organization that's internal to us. It is a live production network. And this view that we're looking at here is in fact the very view that our IT team sees day in and day out when they are managing all of our networks, which as you can see here are distributed around the world. Some of these pins indicate locations of single networks. Some of the larger ones indicate locations of groups of networks. For example, this one in California, there are 39 networks, and if we dive in or zoom in, we'll see they're further split out across California. We can also come in here and say type in London and look at the network infrastructure in London or perhaps Sydney, or if we're looking for a particular one like Meraki Corp, we can click in and dive in to see what's going on there. And in this view, we'll now be able to see what's happening with the users, the devices, and the applications, really the activity that's happening on the network. Now, I mentioned near the beginning that the entire Meraki solution is managed from the dashboard, and we're about to dive into the Wi-Fi clients. But before we do that, I'll just point out that what we're looking at here actually applies to not only wireless clients, but also clients that are on the wired network. So for example, here we could switch to see only the clients that are on the wired network or on the Wi-Fi network. And for the Wi-Fi, we could further filter it out by SSID. We may want to look at only the corporate SSID or the guest SSID and so on. And we'll dive in here by starting to look at only the wireless clients, and let's have a look at the past week's worth of data. And what we'll see is that 707 clients connected. They used about 486 gigabytes of traffic. You can see the throughput activity up and down as the business days go on, and of course quieter over the weekend and then picking back up early in this week. And below we see the list of those clients. Right now they're sorted by their usage, and we can immediately see which devices are consuming the most bandwidth on the network. We can scroll down to see how that bandwidth consumption compares to others. For example, if there's one user that is using 3 or 4 times more bandwidth than anyone else, it would be immediately visible here. In our case, we have the top user that's using just a bit more bandwidth than, say, the next 5 or 4, and then everyone else is using less than 10 gigabytes of data in the past week. Now, with hundreds of clients, of course, we can go in and find a device of interest. We can page through all these clients. We can search by MAC or IP addresses and just punch that in here. But MAC and IP addresses aren't necessarily the most handy to obtain, at least to do so quickly. So we've also integrated a technology called client fingerprinting. And this allows you to very quickly find a device of interest simply by searching. For example, we can type in iPad and find that 33 iPads connected to the network. They use almost 600 megabytes of data. We can, of course, look for Android devices, 116 Androids connected. They used 8.75 gigabytes of data. Or we can search for somebody's name, say Dominique, and find Dominique's devices, an iPad and what looks like a MacBook Air, because it is a Mac OS X device. And this is made possible by the infrastructure, the wireless APs, actually looking at interesting bits of network data, and in particular, identifying bits, things like DHCP requests, web browser user agents, NetBIOS and Bonjour traffic, and so on. And the system is automatically profiling and recognizing the devices so that as an administrator, all we need to do is come in here and type, say, a username or a device type, and then very quickly find that device. Now we can go in here and get details about this device. This happens to be a device running Mac OS X. It's a MacBook Air. In fact, it's been connected to the Wi-Fi network since just before 11 a.m. this morning to an SSID called Meraki Corp and to an access point called 4B6. And this one, you can see, has a pretty healthy signal strength. It's connected with a 29 dB on channel 36. And you'll see even more information about the user and the device and its capabilities. This one in particular has 802.11ac. So this is one of the newer MacBook Air models. And lucky for Dominic, because he gets a very speedy connection, you'll see the channel bandwidth. It supports up to 80 megahertz. It's a dual spatial stream MIMO laptop. So it doesn't support up to 1.3 gigabits per second. It tops out at 867, but that's almost twice as fast as even a triple stream 802.11n device. So it's still very, very speedy for Dominique. And then on the right side, we'll see the approximate location of the client. And in this case, this is made possible by triangulation data that is made available and reported back into the dashboard from the several APs that may have detected the device over the air, and it's overlaid with a floor plan that we've already uploaded into the dashboard. If you don't have a floor plan, there's also a built-in Google map that you can use. You can switch over to the satellite view and maybe zoom out a little bit so you can have a better look. And that's the approximate location, of course, with the access point that it's connected to right here. Below, we have a lot of visibility into this user's activity. What would someone with 802.11ac do? What kind of traffic would they consume? Well, we've already seen that this is the number 2 consumer of bandwidth on the network. So Dominique is taking advantage of 802.11ac. And what's going on there? What is he doing? Well, we see the usage patterns as they go up and down over time. There was a larger spike over here around the afternoon of March 13th. And then on the right side, we have details about what applications are being used on the network from this device. You can see quite a large chunk being used for email, in fact, over 4 gigabytes. Then we have music, in particular iTunes, over 3 gigabytes. And then we have secure web traffic, software and antivirus updates, regular web traffic, almost a gigabyte. So we can see there's quite a bit of just email and iTunes. Now, if that's something that we want to throttle a little bit, we can come in here and modify the policy for Dominique. We can apply a predefined group policy. We simply define these on another page. And we might want to say throttle video and music because there's a lot of iTunes activity. Or we might want to block BitTorrent and gaming if Dominique were to be using a lot of games on the network or using BitTorrent apps. Or we could simply categorize Dominique into the bandwidth abuser category and then place kind of generally restrictive access to the network for his device. If the user is really abusing the network, we can block the user entirely and add a message, please see the IT department as soon as possible, and the user won't be able to connect to the network anymore and will in fact be shown this message on a splash page the next time they try to connect. Now we can go into looking at the details of the activity, the bandwidth, the applications that are being used by for any of those devices. We can also come back here to the clients page and look at not only Dominique's device with the MacBook Air, but also what's happening with the network as a whole. And here we see there's a similar pie chart. In fact, we can click it to expand to see over 100 apps that are automatically classified and reported by the system. So you'll see things like video, email, file sharing, music, voice and video conferencing, software and antivirus updates, social media. No surprise that Facebook is somewhere up there. And this is working in a similar way to the client fingerprinting technology that we looked at a moment ago, in that the access points are automatically looking at the network traffic, in this case using deep packet inspection, and building profiles and reporting the activity in this view here. You don't have to do anything to build a profile for each of these apps, just like you don't have to build profiles for iPads or iPhones or Android devices to be able to find them. And all we need to do is look in this pie chart, expand it, and see what's happening on the network, what applications are most popular. And this really becomes the basis for an informed policy decision about what to do with regards to network traffic. And if we find that some of these are a bit too high, for example, here's iTunes, followed by Pandora, and we have some other music applications, we can go in and throttle these applications and make sure that people aren't consuming too much bandwidth with them. We can even block them if you want to prevent them from being used entirely. And that's done on the firewall and traffic shaping page. Now this applies as it does for 11N, just as equally with 802.11ac access points. These policies are built right into the 11AC and 11N APs, and once we create these policies and click to save the changes, then those policies will be pushed out to the APs and they will enforce them right at the network edge. For example, if we want to shape traffic on the SSID, we can create a new rule here and use one of these categories, or even select the apps individually. For example, for video and music, we can select things like Pandora, Spotify, Netflix, there's iTunes again, and so on. Well, let's just go ahead and click the whole category. And we can add another one maybe for gaming, which might be taking up a lot of bandwidth. And then we can move the slider to choose a limit. And in this way, we actually restrict those apps to 100 kilobits per second, and we don't have to worry about how they work at all. In fact, that category of video and music includes things like Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, and so on. We don't have to worry about the IP addresses that they use, the port ranges, whether they're peer-to-peer or centralized, because some use different methods of connectivity. All we do is choose the category or choose the individual app, set the slider to the appropriate limit, and we don't need to do anything else. If we want to block an app entirely, we can go up here to the Layer 7 firewall section and, in fact, go and block, say, the peer-to-peer category. And here we could block all peer-to-peer apps, or if there's one that's become particularly popular, we could say block BitTorrent or Kazaa or just encrypted peer-to-peer in general. And again, we don't have to worry about how peer-to-peer apps work if we want to block them. Sometimes they might be a bandwidth concern, sometimes a liability concern, sometimes both. We can simply add a single rule there with a couple of clicks and deny peer-to-peer apps from being used. Now, there might be apps that instead of throttling or blocking, you might want to prioritize things that are important for day-to-day use, maybe VoIP and video conferencing and email. We saw that Dominique was using quite a bit of email. So instead of moving the slider back and forth, we can in fact choose to have those apps ignore the SSID limit. In this case, they won't be throttled by the wireless network, and we can optionally set priority tagging so that other devices, other network infrastructure, can queue that application traffic appropriately. Now we've been looking a lot into the devices, the users, the applications on the network. Let's have a look at the infrastructure itself by looking at the APs and seeing what they look like in real time. With the AP view, we can see which access points are deployed, which ones are online, which ones might be offline. In fact, there's one here that's unreachable. This one has been disconnected for a good while. And then we can also see other access points that are part of the deployment. You can see here they're sorted by the current number of clients. In this case, there are several dozen connected to the top 4 or 5 there. And we can also see the model number here on the right. Let's have a look at one of the access points that has 802.11ac. This is an MR34. It doesn't have any clients connected right now. It is just about lunchtime here in San Francisco, but we can have a look at the details about it. We can see, for example, the configuration and the status. And notably, because it's 11ac, we'll see it is using 5 gigahertz and it's using an 80 megahertz channel, the primary one being channel 161. We also have a floor plan that's overlaid on the right side. And we have some information about the Ethernet connectivity and PoE power source or power source. You'll see here it is connected to port 38 on a switch called IDF 4.2.4. Again, that's just an internal name we have for that switch. Let's just go over here for a brief moment to look at port 38 on that switch. Because we have Meraki switches deployed in the same environment, and this access point is connected to a Meraki switch, we can immediately look at that port on that switch. It happens to be a 48-port PoE switch. This particular port is a trunk port with a particular native VLAN. It's offering or delivering 10.7 watts of power to this Wi-Fi access point. There's no port mirroring, and you can see here the connectivity of that device, the AP. And if we wanted to, we can even run a packet capture on this port to troubleshoot, or we can even run a cable test to check the integrity of the Ethernet cable, which is probably going through a patch panel between the switch port and the wireless AP, and make sure that the Gig E connection, the Cat5 or Cat6, is connected and all of it is working reliably inside the cable. Back to the access point, we'll see some live tools below showing us channel utilization, current clients, troubleshooting tools, for example, to measure routes, check throughput, even the ability to reboot the AP right from the dashboard. And finally, one last thing I'd like to show before we talk a little bit about this deployment considerations is the RF spectrum view that we showed earlier in one of the slides. This view gives us an overview of the channel utilization and the conditions on both bands. You'll see by access point, we can see what's going on. And in fact, 5 gigahertz band looks pretty good on all those APs. The 2.4 gigahertz band doesn't look as good, especially in this one, 588. So we can click in and now see that real-time spectrum analyzer and see a couple of views here. The top one showing the instantaneous view of what's happening right now, and the bottom one showing a elapsed time view of that RF spectrum that we see at the top, just laid out in a time, and you'll see it's slowly filling up. It'll take 3 minutes to fill up that screen, and then we can identify trends over time or see if that interference is really sustained in a particular area that we are looking at. We can easily toggle between 2.4 and 5 gigahertz band. For this particular AP, it's a little bit more exciting to look at 2.4 gigahertz. So we'll let that fill up, and you can keep an eye on that. And below, you'll see some metrics around the channel utilization for as detected by this AP for all those channels. On 2.4 gigahertz here, numbers 1 through 11. And of course, if we toggle over to 5 gigahertz, we'll see those too. And we see the current utilization and the average utilization over the past 80 seconds. And we can see which ones are of particular interest. And it looks like mostly channels 6 and 11 are the ones that have the highest utilization. And that's reflected here by what you can see in the RF spectrum view. Channel 11 especially is one that has quite a bit of RF energy. And this way we can keep an eye on the interference. If there are things like microwave ovens or Bluetooth devices causing interference, jamming the channel even, then we can go in and investigate. Of course, the RF environment won't be detected in exactly the same way by every AP since they are deployed in different locations. And here we can single out what might be the source of a particular RF channel being with very high utilization or even jammed. So that's a quick look at the real-time RF spectrum view and a look inside a particular 802.11ac access point. I'd like to spend a few moments just discussing how 802.11ac can be deployed and some key considerations when you're looking into that. The key thing is that really 802.11ac can be dropped into your existing 11n network, which means because it's completely backwards compatible, you can take advantage of the plug-and-play nature of the Meraki APs. As I mentioned earlier, you plug them in, you turn them on, they automatically download their configuration, and they will take into account the RF spectrum and channel planning and channelization of the other APs in the network, and of course, they will self-optimize with AutoRF. I mentioned earlier when we were looking inside or under the hood at one of the APs that we do have optimized power circuitry in the MR34. And that means that you don't have to upgrade your PoE switch infrastructure to take advantage of 802.11ac. The MR34 does work with legacy or lower power 802.3af PoE. So if you have that in place, you can continue to use it. The MR34 will operate 11AC with full triple stream MIMO operation. The third radio, however, will be deactivated and be running in background opportunistic mode for Air Marshal for the security aspect and Auto RF for RF optimization. And additionally, the MR34 will lower its CPU clock speed and switch to using 2 spatial streams instead of 3 on the 2.4 gigahertz radio. Then, if and when you do decide to upgrade your PoE infrastructure, for example, to 802.38t, then it'll automatically turn on the third radio in a full-time mode, provide that 24/7 scanning and RF optimization, and of course, switch back to normal operation for the 2.4 gigahertz client serving radio and the CPU. Now, 802.11ac is a very hot topic, very exciting time in wireless. 11n, as you recall, came out several years ago, and it's the first time in a while that we've seen a new and exciting standard that really increases the speed, and 11ac sure does increase it by quite a bit. While that is very exciting, it is important to consider not only the specific 802.11ac features and speeds, but also look at what the wireless solution looks like as a whole. We've designed the MR34 and the 802.11ac features to drop in and to be a part of a complete solution. And in fact, the MR34 inherits the same out-of-the-box feature set as the rest of the Meraki MR wireless AP lineup. And as we went through the dashboard, hopefully you saw that some of those things that we've built into the dashboard and into the management experience of the wireless network applies seamlessly to 11ac as it does to 11n. So things like the client fingerprinting, the control over bandwidth and application traffic, the user fingerprinting, the management of not only wireless, but also, for example, the switches. When we went to see the particular switch port to which an 11ac access point was connected, all of that is part of a complete solution, and we do keep that in mind when we're even designing specific 11ac features. And it's just something to keep in mind as you're looking to perhaps upgrade or phase in an upgrade to 11ac. So I'd like to wrap up the session by having a quick look at the Meraki product lineup, and then if we do have a couple more minutes, then we'll leave some time open for Q&A. We've talked a lot about the MR34, which is the most advanced cloud-managed AP. Of course, it does support 11ac, including with application QoS. It has a dedicated security radio for air marshal and RF management, and it's designed from the ground up for cloud management and can seamlessly be integrated into your existing Meraki deployment if you have that, or if you're upgrading entirely, it'll work right out of the box with a very advanced feature set that's built into the entire Meraki wireless line. The other Meraki product families we mentioned briefly, there of course is a full line of MR access points, not only 11ac, but also 11n, indoor and outdoor. And switches we looked at very briefly in the dashboard. They are available in access and aggregation models with and without PoE, with lower budget and higher budget PoE capabilities. And the security appliances called the MX family, those are designed as a complete networking and security solution in a single appliance. There are also several models to scale from smaller deployments, say on the order of 10 to 20 users, all the way up to large campuses with thousands of users. Together, these products form a complete edge and branch networking portfolio, and all of them are, of course, integrated under that single cloud-based management dashboard. Now, going back specifically to 11ac, if you are interested in getting your hands on one of these access points, we do have a free evaluation program available. This allows you to try out an MR34 at no risk and with no commitment. You can see how it works in your environment. If you have any questions on configuration or integration with what you already have, we're happy to make tech support available to you. And then you can really see if it's the right fit for you. If it is, you can purchase it. If it's not, you can simply send it back to us. And if you want to get started right away, there's a link that you can see there at the bottom. And of course, you can also discuss it with your Cisco Meraki rep, and he or she will be happy to go over the details with you. So with that, we're just about at the end of the session. I've seen that a lot of questions have been coming in and are being answered. So I'm just going to see if there are some questions that are still remaining or that might be worth repeating. And one just came in about range. How does 11ac range compared to 11n? So that's a great question. Today, and with the 11ac products that are out on the market, it essentially has equivalent range to a top-end 11n access point. For both 11ac and 11n, the top ends are really with triple stream MIMO, and those configurations for 11n and 11ac have pretty similar coverage. If you're comparing 11AC to 2x2 or 1x1 11N, it's generally going to have better coverage. A couple of questions came in on density. What kind of density can we expect to see? Great question. We can expect to see pretty dense environments and support with 11AC. Naturally, it'll depend a little bit not only on the AP, but also the types of clients that are connected and what applications are being used for sure. But we can expect, for example, for an MR34, upwards of 100 clients connected to it simultaneously. Another question came in on PoE, if we have PoE injectors for non-PoE switches or if there's a power adapter. We do sell PoE injectors supporting 802.3at. And there's also an AC adapter available for the MR34 if you want to go that way. A question came in, is the MR34 available now? Yes, it is now available. Dale asks a great question about security. Can you use the security features with switches other than Meraki switches or other Cisco switches? Yes, you can. So we've designed all of the products, including the Wi-Fi and 11AC access point, to be fully functional in a completely standalone way. You can use the Air Marshal security features if you have another vendor's switches. And you can use, if you have Meraki switches, for example, you don't need to have a Meraki security appliance or Meraki wireless. You'll lose some things in terms of the ability to manage both parts of the network together. For example, I showed in the demo how from the dashboard view looking at the AP, we can click in to look at the port to which it's connected. That's because we do have Meraki switches deployed. If we didn't, we would simply see LLDP or CDP information there. We wouldn't be able to manage those other vendor switches because, of course, they're not managed through the dashboard. Okay, we're just about at the end of the questions and running out of time, so I do want to wrap it up and thank everyone for attending. There's one thing I'd like to ask of you, and that's if you wouldn't mind answering a quick 2-question survey. You'll see that as you exit the webinar, and this will just give us a chance to hear what you thought about today's webinar, about the demo, what other things you'd like to see, and really anything in general that you'd like to share with us that might help improve the webinars in the future. It shouldn't be too long at all because it's just 2 questions. And again, you'll see that as you exit the webinar. So thanks again, everyone, for attending, for those great questions. And I hope all of you have a fantastic day.